And what is in our way, a lot of it is our beliefs. A lot of it is what we believe to be true. The first one is the definition itself. When we look at the definition of what it means to be depressed, for example, it combines the physical, mental, emotional, and spiritual pain with our inability to react to it. It combines the two in a way that makes us think that's true. You'll ask a lot of people, is it possible to be depressed and have it not control your life? And people don't know it's impossible. Yes, it is. I know lots of people who will tell you, I can be depressed and act normal. It no longer controls our lives. Well, a great example is the hallucination states. I've talked to groups of doctors and asked them, what's the definition of schizophrenia? There's a word when you're bipolar, when you have mood issues, the same hallucinations and delusions combined with mood is called schizoaffective. It's not schizophrenia, those are two different things, but there's a lot of overlap. But when you look up the definition, it says, and it's got some time period functions that are kind of strange to say the least. You have to have this for 30 days. So does that mean if I have it for 29 days, I'm not really having an issue? It doesn't really make a lot of sense. But if we look at it and say, I hallucinate and I have delusions, and I have a difficulty concentrating, I can't function normally, I can't communicate well. If you think about it, those are reactions to the condition. They're not the condition themselves. But when you look at the definition, it makes it as if we're not capable. So the definition isn't even definitive of what it is. It is either I hallucinate and have delusions. That could be the definition. But if you say, if I don't have hallucinations and delusions and I have the rest, would you diagnose me as schizophrenic? And they'd go, no, that's something else. It's a different disorder. But what if the definition was an inability to understand and deal with hallucinations and delusions? What if that's the definition? Well, then by that definition, I don't have it at all. Because I hallucinate constantly. But it doesn't control my life, and I find meaning in it. So like I said with John Nash, I have a very similar set of experiences as you saw in the movie. And you might think that some of them are horrible. You might think that some of them are beautiful and wonderful, and that's true. But most of us freak out about the horrible ones. So I want to share with you an incredibly intense experience that I recently went through, and try to put that in perspective for you. My mother was in the hospital for 2 months in her deathbed. And my family was really concerned, and I flew to Florida to see her thinking that I was going to go watch her die. When we got there, there's a hallucination that I have that was missing in my life for one of the first times ever. When I look at people, I see an aura around everybody. When I look in your eyes, I see your soul in there. Now that could be totally a hallucination and delusional, or it could be true, I don't know. But that's an experience that I have, and looking at my mother, it wasn't there. And that was pretty shocking for me, because I interpreted that as my mom's dying, her soul is leaving her, and she's going to die. That was a traumatic experience for me. So a couple of weeks later, I'm walking down the street in San Francisco, and there's oncoming traffic. And something that happens to me so often I don't even notice anymore. While this bus was coming, I felt myself jump in front of it. And wham! Got hit by the bus. So, happens a lot to me. I drive down the road and I swerve in front of traffic, I drive into gas pumps and they blow up. Things like that happen all the time. They're not that big of a deal anymore. But if you take somebody and they have that intense and that kind of an experience, and they have it once or twice in their life, they think it's incredibly significant. They talk about the vision they have. It's so significant in their lives. But if you find somebody who does it constantly and doesn't understand it, they think it's a horrible experience. But those that have it all the time and gain some insight and understanding see it as no better, no worse no different from any other experience. No matter what we do, we can find meaning in it, or it can be a meaningless experience. Whether it's talking one-on-one with somebody, or having a hallucination. It's not really that much of a difference from the point of perspective. But this one was different. As soon as the bus hit me and killed me, I jumped inside of my wife and turned and totally freaked out. Just totally lost it. I can't believe my husband just killed himself right in front of me. I can't deal with it. And I'm like staggering down the road in shock of what had happened. Only nobody said I was staggering down the road, so it was probably all in here. But after about a half a block, I turned to my wife Ellen, and I said, I got to tell you what just happened. She goes, what? And I said, well, I remember that bus went by, I jumped in front of it and it killed me. And she said, so? You do that all the time. And I said, yes, but this one was different. And I explained it to her. And the more I would think about it, the more I came to realize that that was my mind's ability to process this really important thing that was happening in my life. I ran a retirement home. Had 104 elderly people, and I watched many of them die. And I watched lots of them have a really traumatic illness like my mother just went through. And they didn't last a long time after that. They generally don't recover and live to 100 when at 80 they had that kind of a health crisis. So because of that experience in my life, I'm dealing with that through my ability to hallucinate. It helped me to sort that out. And then there was this bonus that happened. I know viscerally inside why, when somebody says I want to kill myself, we freak out. I know why. I went through it. My gift of being able to hallucinate gave me the ability to have insight into why we flip out when somebody talks about suicide. It makes sense to me now. It's a perspective that I have. I have a different perspective. I tried to kill myself once. When I hear people say, think about those around you, you won't kill yourself. Think about the people you're left behind. I know a different perspective. When I was in that state, and I've talked to lots of people that were also in that state, I hate to say this for you, you don't exist. When we're in that state, the argument that says, what about the people you left behind? We go, what people we left behind? There's my pain, it has to end, I don't know how to end it, make it end now. So both perspectives are important. We need to find a better solution. We need to find a way to help people understand what is going on. So now, what once almost killed me, now when I look at it experientially, it's happening. I go, I understand this. I know this is happening. I can find meaning in this. I can find insight from this. And I have the self-mastery that says I'm not going to take action. My doctor says it really doesn't matter if you keep contemplating suicide all the time as long as you don't do it. Having the self-mastery to choose how to respond to our stimulus is everything. Well, when we define our conditions as if you're depressed, you have to kill yourself. If you're depressed, you can't function. If you hallucinate, you won't be able to understand it. You won't be able to act normally. By definition, we're locking ourselves into a belief system that becomes true. If we would change the way we define it and say, depression is these states, physical, mental, emotional, spiritual pain. Schizophrenia is hallucinations and delusions. They can have reactions. The reactions can be extremely negative. With training, those reactions can be positive. When we change our definition, we change what's possible. Well, the next part of that is we call it an illness. We call it a disorder. And there's plenty of examples of this being a disorder, of this being an illness. There's plenty of reasons that we can call it that way. But when we call it a disorder only, we lock ourselves into a belief system. What if we call it a condition? I have the bipolar condition. Condition doesn't have a value judgment on it. Condition is neither positive or negative. I have a bipolar condition. Sometimes I'm up, sometimes I'm down. I have a range that's comfortable for me. When I get outside that range, I act out. I do things that were beyond my self-control. But you know what? We all have a condition called life. And we all get outside of our comfort zone, and we act and react to things that are outside of our control. We call life a condition. We don't call life an illness. Bipolar for me is a condition. If I break away from the bounds of calling it a disorder all the time, and recognizing that there is a disorder. There's a disorder, not that I have it, that I don't know how to react to it. The disorder is my reaction to the stimulus, not the stimulus itself. Everything changes. Well, another one is we call it a mood disorder. I have a mood disorder, but I get it treated in a behavioral health clinic. I think it's a behavior disorder. There's nothing wrong with the fact that I have up moods and down moods. There's nothing wrong with that inherently. What's wrong is my reactions, my behaviors as a consequence of that state. If I behave by lashing out at people, by trying to kill myself, or by thinking badly, which is a behavior, I am reacting to the stimulus of the condition. Behaviorally bad, my behavior is disordered. If I work on trying to stop the mood disorder, and I focus on my goal in life is to get rid of the mood, I end up with a narrow life and no skills to deal with the high and low. I have no skills. If I work on the behaviors, and I function on how am I behaving as a consequence of the state, and I learn to control my behaviors, the moods don't matter anymore. Because I focus on the behaviors, it taught me that I can behave no matter how deep my mood. Changes everything.